Hey folks, welcome to the Jason Wright Show. Today I've got a great guest for you. Jay Sapovits is a quintessential entrepreneur's story. You know, I love bringing you good entrepreneur conversations and kind of figuring out that hero's journey that every successful entrepreneur goes on. And this one is absolutely that very thing. Jay is a great guy. He's had a lot of success. And you know what? One of my favorite parts of his story is his overcoming of a gambling addiction. And when we start to talk about that and just how he views his personal life, in particular, how important the choices we make, big and small, and being conscious of the compounding effect of every single choice we make in life, be it for our health, be it for how we treat others, whether it's an addiction, porn, alcohol, gambling, drugs. It all comes down to making choices. That was one of my favorite parts of this conversation. And then also we did something I've never done before with an entrepreneur. We went through a complete chronological list of his career endeavors. And I challenged him to kind of think about where he had been on his journey, kind of what stood out each stop of the way. It's a great conversation. It's wide ranging. It was I thought it was like a little bit of a slow takeoff, but then once Jay and I got going, I mean, he's somebody I want to bring back to you, the Jason Wright Show audience, more and more and more. Hey, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star rating. Please subscribe to the podcast. Share this podcast with any entrepreneur or wannabe entrepreneur that you know. This is a great way to help you and your friends that want to get into the entrepreneurial space. One of the best ways to learn is get some virtual mentors. Hear the stories of those that have gone before you. That's what this show will do for you. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, please click like and subscribe. You can tell the channel's not that big. I'm really trying to go all in and grow my channel because the bottom line is if you're going to do a podcast these days, you got to have some video to go with it. I want that for my audience. And with that, without begging you for any more likes, subscribes, or promotion of this episode, I just want to say I'm Jason Wright. This is the Jason Wright Show, and I'm so grateful for you tuning in. Enjoy the show. Jay, welcome to the Jason Wright Show.
Jason, nice to be here.
Man, I tell you what, first of all, I got to tell this audience, you're listening to one of the kindest and most understanding guests I've ever had because I made it almost impossible for Jay to come on the show. I kept having to reschedule, and so now we're here. And I'm really excited because, dude, your story is kind of amazing. So what I wanted to say was not that there's anything nefarious or whatever, dude, but you almost have a story like it's made for a book or a movie. How did you get here, man?
Yeah, boy, I mean, that's such a expansive question, how I got here. Look, I didn't know anything along the way. I mean, my dad was a school teacher and my mom was a bookkeeper. And I didn't know that you could even own a business. So I just didn't come from that background. And in fact, where I grew up, there were a lot of wealthy individuals that gained their wealth through working for others. So DuPont's, outside Philadelphia, was really, my town was like a feeder for working inside of that, either the banking system or the DuPont world. So not a lot of business ownership. So I just didn't know it existed. And when I went off to college, I needed cash. So I started working at a dry cleaners across the street from the university because I lived on campus and it was the only place I could get to. It was pre having an automobile my freshman year on campus. And I'll tell you, Jason, I can point to where I'm sitting today. I could directly trace a line from where I'm sitting right now to that dry cleaners, the lessons learned, the people met, the opportunities that came from it. And yeah, I did a lot. I mean, my travel with the UNLV basketball team during their undefeated season and the season prior came from a relationship that I got at that dry cleaners, which, meant that I was being exposed to guys like Larry Johnson and Stacey Augmon and Greg Anthony. I mean, we were all kids together, right? I mean, I'm 18, 19 years old. And then, the offshoots of that, friends with the head coach at Texas A&M Golf, JT Higgins, and because he traveled with the team all the time, and go down to see Larry play when he got drafted by Charlotte, and gives you a hug on the court because you were 19 years old together, staying in dorm rooms in Logan, Utah. So I've done a lot in my life, and I've kind of just kept moving. Not all has worked out, but yeah, it's there's definitely a story in there. I think what's the moral? I'm not sure. But look, I lead an exceptionally boring life now. I mean, I guess I don't lead an exceptional. I mean, Super Bowl, and I did go to the Super Bowl and Masters for the week. I guess that's not so boring, but yeah, I mean, compared to what it was, which was felt like 24/7, always in action, always had action around me, and complete and total chaos. Where I'm at now is definitely a step back, and I'm happier now than I've ever been. So I think it's the right place to be.
So it's interesting you mentioned Larry Johnson. So I have these random little connections to Larry Johnson. One, my brother-in-law went to high school at Skyline with Larry
Mhm.
Johnson. They were classmates. And then two, Larry Johnson's English teacher,
Mhm.
Evelyn Cates. If Miss Cates, if you happen to be watching, hello, she was a phenomenal lady. She was Larry's teacher at Skyline before she moved to the metropolis of Sulphur Springs, Texas, which is where I'm from. And so just a couple of random connections there to Larry Johnson. And it's interesting. I want to hear more about the cleaners, because it's kind of weird how serendipitous little things like that can be.
Mhm.
And especially though, I guess this is a cleaners in Vegas, right?
Steiner Cleaners. Yeah, right
Okay,
across the
so
street in the Vaughn Shopping Center at the corner of Tropicana and Maryland Parkway. It's no longer there, but it's next to the Four Kegs, which if you ever see Guy Fieri, who I was also in college with, he talks about the Four Kegs all the time. And that was the business that was right next door to Steiner's.
So being in Vegas, I don't guess it's unusual that gambling at some point came into your life. So tell us, did that happen to the cleaners? Did you start placing bets at the cleaners? That sounds like kind of like a
No,
made for movie situation, but how did that start?
yeah, gambling was always part of my early life because my dad liked to go to the racetrack. So I was my dad's little buddy. And I was, from the time I was, the night I was born, he handed out cigars at Brandywine Racetrack. And Brandywine was 10 minutes from my house. And I would go with my dad, and my dad would go. I mean, he only really went the days that ended in Y. Um, the other days he took off. So those were the days that I ended up going with them. And yeah, I mean, we went Delaware Park, Brandywine, and then, anywhere else that he could find. And that happened, as a little kid. That's kind of how I was raised. I was raised going to the racetrack every day.
So this is what I want to ask, because I know that at least looking in your background, it seems like kind of one of the pivotal moments was whenever you ended up making the trek out to Vegas and you ending up there. So
Mhm.
kind of set the stage for how that all started. How do you end up in Vegas?
Best friend's brother went to Vegas. It was never really an assumption I would go to college. It was always like in my family, I was going to go to college. I watched my sister go to school 7 miles from where we grew up. I knew I didn't want to do that. And when I was 16 years old, I traveled alone with my best friend to go visit his brother in Las Vegas. We went for 10 days. I stepped off the plane, and the minute I saw the Las Vegas Strip, I knew that that was where I wanted to be. Fell in love with the city right away. 10 days on the campus. 10 days, excuse me, in Las Vegas. I never set foot on the campus. Came home and told my parents that's the only college I'm going to apply to. And it was the only college that I applied to. And that's, obviously where I ended up going. So, um, yeah, uh, I don't know any other people who only applied to one school, but that's the route that I went.
So Now that you're there, is this where, and I suppose this is where the kind of the arc of the entrepreneurial journey starts. And one of the things that's checkered throughout your background is you seem to have a knack, and this audience, one of the things I try to do, Jay, is tease out those things that make a guy like you able to see opportunity at every turn. And this is who you remind me of. One of my, I was talking to a guy about buying his business years ago. 74-year-old dude that was so unassuming, man. He had this heavy construction business. One of my buddies and I, we fly out there to look at this business that he said he would never sell because no one would ever be able to afford it. He had no family or friends. He's like, I never expected to sell this. I don't like lawyers. I'm not going to deal with lawyers. If I ever sell it, I'll just shut the doors and have a big auction.
Mm.
But after we cracked the nut of that hard exterior, he talked to us about how he had built what I got to tell you, Jay. It's not sexy because it's a construction business, but
Mhm.
it was one of the most unbelievably well-run and impressive outfits I've ever looked at. And one of the things that he said that he was good, he said, the thing I'm most good at, he didn't use this term, but like his superpower, he said, I know how to find opportunities. He said, I've studied all the great industrialists. And this was a self-educated man. This wasn't some highfalutin,
Mhm.
Ivy League MBA. This is just a blue collar, unbelievable
Yeah.
entrepreneur. And he said, I studied all the great industrialists. And he said, one of the things I realized that they were really good at was finding opportunity. And he said, that's what I've done. And he took us around the company and he showed us like this warehouse full of surplus goods that he bought after a hurricane had put one of his competitors out of business. Then he goes and he shows us this unbelievable, kind of speaking to one of your past businesses. He opens the door, and this is not a guy that worked out regularly, but he opens the door in his office to this unbelievable gym at his warehouse. And he said, I bought these weights and I've outfitted this thing for 10 cents on the dollar from some fitness company that went out of business. And I get a huge tax break for having a wellness program in my company. It was little things like that he was just
Mhm.
always looking for different opportunities. That reminds me of kind of your background. It seems to
Mm.
me like you have a knack for finding opportunities. So how how do you evaluate that? What do you think it is that has given you the skill to see things that others don't? And where this audience might be able to start opening their eyes a little wider, open their ears a little better. How do you go about seeking and finding and then capitalizing on opportunities?
I think that came later. It didn't come in college. I was a guy who always moved in college. I was a guy who always took action and against my own experience. Like I was the sports director of the campus radio station. No one asked me to do that. I went and I uh uh pitched the station director on a sports talk show and did that. We ended up broadcasting the basketball games and the football games and the baseball games. Nobody asked me to do that. I just, you know, asked and pitched. And I just always pitched things I wanted and figured, why can't we do it? And that sort of happened in college. But then, I got a job in radio when I came out of college because the station in Philadelphia didn't have an overnight. And I said, why not have an overnight? And I was willing to work for less than, at a price that they were willing to pay. And then when I got into the business world, finally I saw a gap, right? I saw a gap at the golf course that I was working in the business world. And I went to the owner and I said, you have this gap and I think I can fill this gap. And he gave me the opportunity. And then I ran and I took advantage of it. And then I identified another gap in the fact that there was no pro golf inside of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia specifically, aside from the senior PGA tour at the time, which happened to be at a rival golf course to the one that I was selling and working at. And I said, hey, to one of my sponsors, if I could bring the best golfers in the world, not senior guys, right? I mean, not, 55-year-old guys that kind of are long in the tooth, but the best players in the world right now, would you be willing to put up some money? And they said, yes. And I had the courage to go ask the best players in the world whether or not they would play. Turns out they said yes. So, it really is just identifying and seeing what you want and just taking action against that. And that was the first time I had ever done that at a real financial gain. Everything else was a willingness to sort of pay my dues before capitalizing on it financially, which I think is probably a skill as well. Because, so many people aren't willing to do that, either because they have financial pressure or they have pressure of the pressure society puts on them. But again, I'll go back to when I was young. I had no idea that you could do any of this stuff. So I felt like everything that I was doing, I was breaking new ground and had no idea that it even existed. Now, there's so much information out in the world that there's no excuse that if you have all creating a business is solving a problem. So if you have a problem, chances are somebody else has that problem. The only thing creating a new business is figuring out a solution to that problem and finding somebody who's willing to buy it. Now, that doesn't mean that there's more than one person willing to buy it, but if you can find one person willing to buy it, then chances are you'll be able to find two and three and so on and so on. And that's really how it sounds simple in thought. But that's, when I was at the golf course, I was working in outside services. It was a recovery job for me. I've shared this elsewhere. I was getting clean I haven't made a bet in over 28 years. When I was at the golf course, I worked in outside services. I was 25 years old. I was changing soft spikes, picking the range, carrying golf clubs, a caddy here and there. I made tips from 7 a.m. until 10 a.m. And I noticed there was a gap from 10 a.m. until noon, almost on a daily basis. Well, if you're working for tips, which I had done as a valet in Vegas as well on the Strip, you figure out where there's gaps because you're not making any money during those gaps. I didn't make any money picking a driving range, but I made money when I pulled bags out of people's carts or changed their soft spikes. This is 1997. So I noticed a gap and had an idea to fill that gap by relationships that I was creating by being personable in a parking lot during a time when I was trying to get my head on straight and move my life in a different direction. So for me, I just feel like we all have problems. We all see problems. We all feel pain points in our daily life. It's never been easier to figure out ways to solve those pain points and potentially create solutions. And if you've had the pain, someone else will have the pain. In this case, the pain was I was working for small income and tips. I didn't have people to fill that gap. The owner's pain of the business was he had gaps in his tea time, right? Like a hotel room, you can't sell Tuesday's hotel room on Wednesday. And I needed a way to fill it. Now, could I have done something more lucrative to, like, for example, fill those hotel rooms and done it on a scale like Hot Wires ended up doing or Hotel Tonight ended up doing? Sure. But I'll go back to the fact that I didn't know business existed barely at the time, right? So I really felt like I didn't get a start in my business life until I was probably in, 25, 26, 27 years old is when I really started to do business and learn that it all existed. So I, definitely felt like it was a late start in life.
Don't you think though that that's kind of almost not knowing what you don't know? Yes, you can short circuit a lot of stuff by having all the information at hand. But don't you think that kind of figuring those things out along the way was probably like, if you knew everything there was to know about business, you may have never even tried those first few endeavors. That's one of the things, man, that I learned about. It was kind of the downside of business school for me is like when I was at 28 's when I bought my first business. And man, I was very naive, didn't know nearly as much as I thought I did, and probably a little cocky too, and a little too self-assured. But because of that, I was willing to do things and take chances because I didn't know all the downside. I wasn't constantly chasing the more efficient way, the thing that made the most sense. And so I just pushed and just went ahead. Do you think that sometimes that it's good to have those experiences where you just kind of you just see the thing, you go after it. It might not be the most efficient. It might not be the best way to execute, but you do it because you learn as you go. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to start messy and be willing to be messy. And if you don't know any other way, there is no other way. So yeah, I think that's an astute observation. So yeah, I'm completely on board with that. I may not have started. Look, I'm here, right? I mean, to run a multi-million-dollar business, I feel I I feel emotionally successful. I am successful. I don't say that as bragging because it took me a long time to feel that way, but that's where I'm at now. And, everything has sort of gotten its way towards me. And to your point, I've led a pretty interesting and creative and fun life on the way to get here. Incredibly fortunate to have had brushes with celebrity and flown in every private jet that you could possibly imagine. And, been at World Series games, the Aaron Boone game when they beat the Red Sox in Yankee Stadium. And, so I've, I've lived. I mean, I definitely, Indy 500, Kentucky Derby, multiple Masters, Super Bowl. I mean, so I've had those fun life experiences, been able to raise a family, so I've had a full life, and I'm not complaining about where I came from. I'm grateful for it. Yeah, it's been anything but a clean run. I can assure you. I mean, I feel like 08, 09 derailed me. I think I probably derailed a little bit of myself from an ego standpoint as well. After a pretty like surreal run with Marquee Jet, and, being part of a company that in 4.5 years went from zero to $1 billion, and thinking that you were a bigger part of it than you probably were. That really happened. My head got super big, and I probably wasn't as good as I needed to be I know I wasn't, to manage through the financial crisis. One thing I've always been willing to do is look back and take inventory, and can't say fix the past, but learn from it and grow and move forward. And that's what I feel I've done. And that's why I feel, I'm sitting in the spot that I'm sitting all these years later.
All right. So one of the things that's in your background, you kind of mentioned it as far as the journey, was the whole gambling thing. And I
Mm.
don't want to, I mean, can we talk about that? Is that cool? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of your story, but I'm always sensitive to that, because the thing is, I also have an unbelievable amount of admiration for anybody who's overcome a serious deal like that. And so kind of take us to, and man, look, you gotta understand, Jay, I'm the type of guy that the most gambling that I'll do is I'll go play the change machine, because at least I break even. That's it.
Yeah,
I
that's
know
funny.
nothing about gambling. I don't know. It's not scruples. I just don't know anything about it. So kind of what gets you into that, but more than anything, I don't really care so much about you. Yeah, I'd love to hear some cool stories about the biggest bet you made that kind of kept you going. But also really what I want to know is, what was the breaking point, and kind of like, what was the behavioral changes that allowed you to pull out of that and never, like you said, never make a bet again? Because that, to me, the utility value for anyone to be able to overcome that sort of internal battle, I just think it speaks volumes of your character, your tenacity, your ability to overcome adversity. So kind of just give us a little flavor of how you started placing the bets, how'd you get sucked in, and then what was it that made you just finally have that breaking moment to say, "I'm out. This no more."
Yeah. I mean, it's been a long time. I don't really have any glamour stories. I think that, I mean, obviously I lived it for a long time, right? It's funny. I went to the track every day with my dad, who he loved it. And in fact, his second profession was a racetrack announcer. I mean, he called races all over he didn't get a job as a racetrack announcer until I was had years of recovery. So I really never watched him because I just stopped participating in horse racing and, um, in full. So, and that was, uh, he's not with us any longer, but that was a love and passion of his. But I mean, I went since I was a kid, but I didn't make my first bet until I was 13 years old. And then, when I did make my first bet, it just kind of it just kind of hooked me. He was always a $2 player, but needed to be in action all the time. And it just that wasn't enough for me. And I always wanted more and more and more. I've always had that more button and that more gene, which has served me well from an entrepreneurial standpoint, not necessarily a balanced perspective, but at least an entrepreneurial perspective, which is this kind of doggedness when I am onto something that I love or feel a charge from, I'll do it in excess. As far as what stopped, just kind of woke up. I always knew that I had an issue. I knew that it was an issue when I was in Vegas. I can remember, even when I was 19 years old, which was 6 years before I made my last bet, I can remember driving to if you remember this, you're a real sicko, but the San Remo Hotel. I remember driving to the San Remo Hotel with, $20 in my pocket, because it was never about how much money I had. I mean, I was a college student. If I had $10, I'd go to the casino. If I had 100, I'd go to the casino. I mean, I was poor. So it wasn't big amounts of money. It was just all I had. So important distinction, right? I mean, if you only have $10 and you gamble $10, like that's a problem. So, excuse me. So yeah. So for me, it was just about the feeling that it created. I was dating my wife, my girlfriend at the time. And, I knew that she wasn't happy with it and didn't want it to be part of her life. She expressed the fact that she didn't want it to be part of her life. I was living paycheck to paycheck, miserable. The wins, the losses, it all sucked. It just got to the point where you felt like you had to do it versus wanted to do it. And one day I had worked an overnight shift at WIP, the radio station I was on. And it was before the before the New Orleans, New England Patriot, Green Bay Packers Super Bowl. And I was driving home in my car. I had about a 45-minute drive. And I was listening to our sister station on the way home. And there was the Sunday morning obligatory 1-hour public service broadcast. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that every Sunday morning. Yeah. That's what happens on radio stations, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. or 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. And this one happened to be by somebody who was on the National Council for Compulsive Gambling. And he was talking about the Super Bowl and how many people will bet on it and how it's an enormous event for gamblers. And I listened to that my entire ride home. And the first time I listened to it was the first time that I had ever seriously allowed the conversation of recovery to get into my life. It took me 6 weeks before I went to my first GA meeting. And when I went to a few days before I went to my first GA meeting, I picked up the phone. I called the 1-800-GAMBLER line, which, by the way, I'm now on. So if you call, you may get me talking to you, because I've done that now for a few years as a point of service back to that community. All right. By the way, I'm not anti-gambling, just so we're on the same page. I'm ambivalent towards it. I have no feelings. There are tons of people who can go out and gamble, knock yourself out, have a blast, enjoy yourself. I just don't happen to be one of them. So I called that number, 1-800-GAMBLER. I got a guy from Scranton, Pennsylvania. His name was Robert. I'll never forget. He talked to me with such honesty and humility, and nobody had ever, because the old saying is, well, why can't you just stop? Right? Well, I don't know why I can't just stop. Right? Like, if I knew why I could stop, I'd stop. But he talked to me with this honesty, and it really facilitated me going to my first ever meeting. And the moment I walk into that meeting, there were a dozen guys there. And it was the only and first time it was the first time and only time in my life that I ever felt like I could be open and honest about my gambling with a room full of people that would understand how I was feeling. I didn't miss a Monday night meeting for 5 years. I turned off all sports, didn't watch sports for about 5 years, all sports, didn't watch, didn't go, people, places, and things. So stopped going to any place where there was any inkling of gaming or gambling. and just dove into recovery full time. To just sort of make a change in my life. And at that same period of time, I got started the business, jobs got better, life got better. Had my first, got married, had my first child. Moved from Philadelphia to Massachusetts, and yeah, away I went. And my March 6th, 1997 was my last bet. I went to my first meeting March 10th of 97, and have been clean and sober from gambling since that time. And yeah, I mean, that's just part of my story and part of who I am. And like I said previously, I am, as far as like apps and like, I stay away from it all. It's just not part of my life anymore. And everybody who knows me knows it's not part of my life, and it's not. It's of no issue. It's in the past. But I talk to people. I mean, you can make a choice and change anytime you want, whether it's the same things that hook you into the gaming or gambling hook you into anything, right? I mean, drugs, alcohol, compulsive eating, it's shopping, the internet, porn, all of it. So yeah, it's definitely there's definitely a better way of life out there. And I've been fortunate to seize it. Though I can tell you, I mean, was it easy at first? No. But the same battle I had back then, I have now too. I mean, you got to stay diligent towards it. This isn't something that, if I start, will I go to Vegas? I went 15 years without going back to Vegas, and now I can go, and I don't even worry about it. Yeah, I don't. It's not. I feel like I'm a different human being, and yeah, I mean, look, almost 10 years ago, I cut everything out. So I mean, I don't drink, drug, no mind altering substances. That's what I said. I'm the most boring human alive. And, one thing you realize is other people don't care what you do. And I think that's a big hurdle to overcome. Like if you and I are at a cocktail party and I'm drinking soda water with lime or a splash of cranberry, and you're drinking a vodka and tonic, I promise, like, you don't care what I'm drinking. You only care what you're drinking. So, that's been a big change, and it's been a change for the better. It's freed me up in so many different ways to just kind of live my life and not worry about being part of anything that potentially could go off the rails. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
You know what you just described, and by the way, I'd probably be by either with you drinking the soda water with a lime or a Topo Chico. I'm the same way, man. And it all has to do, I think, and what you just described very eloquently, I think, was it becomes an identity-based habit. And I know James Clear talks about this, BJ Fogg talks about this. And for me, it's like this show, the motto of this show, improve always and always. I talk about self-improvement all the time. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but that's whenever I decided to make that kind of my mantra / identity is to live this improve always and always lifestyle. Drinking just didn't play a role in that. And that was tough for me, man, because drinking was a big part of my association with my dad, my family. We were big drinkers. We would hang out, big social drinkers. And so giving that up, that was probably what I was giving up more than anything. Not drinking wasn't that big of a deal. But once you take on, and there's something else I heard in what you were describing too. And again, I'm talking to the audience on this, just because if you're struggling with, like just exactly like you said, Jay, porn addiction, drinking, gambling, smoking, doing drugs, whatever the case may be, when you start to you started this show out with gratitude. You start talking about how thankful you were for where you are. When you start to be grateful for those things that you have that don't involve the habit, fill in the vice, fill in the blank. But then when you start to move away from a place to where, like you right now, you look in the mirror and you don't see Jay the gambler. You see Jay the entrepreneur, Jay the overcomer, Jay this learns these lessons from different things. It's a part of your past, but it's not a part of your current identity. And that's the way I am. It's like I would be a complete fraud if I did this show and I talked about health and wellness and longevity and entrepreneurship and tried to do these things, again, not for scruples. And I say the same thing you say about gambling. When people are around me and I don't drink, I hate it. Because one of the things they will do, drinking is one of those weird things, man, that you'll be in some instances, where people will be like, if you say I don't drink, they'll be like, oh, like is there something wrong with you, or did you have some problem or whatever? And it's like, no. And I'm like, no, please go ahead and drink. Don't drink, don't not drink because of me. I don't care. And I don't think there is anything wrong with
Mhm.
drinking. It's just not a part of who I am. So I think everything you were saying there was based on that's just not part of your identity now. And whenever you decide I'm just not a person that does that, it makes all the difference in the world, because then you start living out the person who either you are aspiring to be, you're challenging yourself to be, and whenever that starts to become the focus, it just it also removes, man, I think that drudgery of willpower and
Hmm.
constantly facing the dragon every damn day. That just gets exhausting. That's what I always tell people that try to rely on willpower to stop a
Well, the-
habit or something. It's like that works for a while, but then you just get weary.
well, I mean, for me, it's just a choice, right? So like,
Yeah.
that's what I learned that's over the course of my long life. What I've learned is that everything is a choice, right? So you want to eat poorly, you want to go to McDonald's, that's a choice. You want to drink alcohol, that's a choice. You want it right. And like, so as an addict, which, definitely have addictive behavior, compulsive, all that, I realize like there's two choices, right? You can make the right choice or the wrong choice. Well, I know the wrong choice. I know the wrong choice all the time, right? Want to play hooky from work? There's consequences. Your revenue is not going to be where you want it to be, right? Your staff's not going to respect you the way you want them to respect you, right? So I know the right and wrong choices. It's now whether I make them or I don't make them. And I used to think in these big, scalable, broad, lofty term, thoughts, right? But the truth is, choices are made in moments. Like this morning is a perfect example. 6:30 in the morning. I like to get to my office at 7 a.m. I stayed in bed till 6:45. I didn't get to my office until 7:30. I could have gotten out of bed at 6:30 and got to my office at 7 like I like to do, right? But I've been traveling for 4 days. I was a little more tired. I wanted to take an extra 15 minutes. That's a choice with very little consequence. But I look back on it and realize that's a choice, or in the moment I make it a choice. So there's others with more consequence, but the greater theme is we probably make hundreds of decisions, I think subconsciously a day, some more impactful than others, but we're choosing the path that we take so if you want to stop drinking, you can just make a choice not to do it in this moment. And then when that urge hits again, you have to make the choice to not do it in that moment. So it's all moment to moment. It's not these, I'm never going to do this again, or I'm never going to do that again. It's, I'm not going to do it right now, because that's all you're in is right now. It's the only time you get the chance to make that choice. So if you make it positively, you're great. If you make it negatively, well, you got to start over. But the good news is you can start over in that next moment. So that's kind of how I've structured my life, and I try to just make choices in the moment that are positive, not negative. And when I do make a negative choice, which happens in this weekend, I was at my son's graduation. I ate cake and cookies. I saw a negative number on the scale. So now I'm making choices that are better than the ones I made this weekend. So there's all these sort of decisions that can be made, choices that can be made moment to moment to moment to moment. And that's kind of how I run my life.
I think I think it's the exact right thing to do. And because those good decisions, they compound, right? And that's one of the
Yes.
things that what you just described in this audience, they hear me say it all the time. You just described the process. Nick Saban's considered a genius because of the process. And essentially, you just described the process perfectly.
Mhm.
He's more interested in his players perfecting the first 7 seconds off the snap of the ball than being focused on the national championship at all times. Because and John Wooden was the same way, right? There's a great book I've got over here on my shelf about Wooden, who would very rarely, if you talk to any of his best players, um, you know, Kareem or Bill Walton, any of those guys, they'd be like, Coach very rarely talked about wins and losses.
All he was worried about was how well you were playing your position at any given moment. That's all he worried about. And he would start every new season, like he'd bring all the new recruits in. And the first thing that John Wooden, probably, arguably, at least top 3 NCAA basketball coaches of all time, one of the greatest leaders of all time, he'd teach them how to put their socks on right. It's just he's do that little thing because he didn't want their feet to be blistered. He didn't want their feet to be too sweaty. He showed them how to lace their shoes properly. And so what you just described, man, is exactly so spot on. And it reminds me of this story. I was at the grocery store. Kids at grocery stores these days, Jay, are just weird. Gone are the days of when they would ask you how you're doing, and you would just be able to go, "I'm great. Thanks for asking." Now, if you say, "I'm good. How are you?" "Well, I get off in 3 hours and I'm tired." And they'll sit there. They all of a sudden turn it into a counseling session. And I'm like, what the heck has happened? And so there's this one kid at the grocery store where my wife and I shop. He's a little out there. And one day, while he's sacking our groceries, he's explaining to the guy that's the checker how he could just quit right now and leave if he wanted to. He has free will. He could just walk off right now. He's quit. He doesn't have to be there. And he's going on and on right in front of my wife and I, having this conversation with his buddy that's the checker. And finally, I just looked at him. I said, "You know what? Don't do that. Don't leave." He said, "Well, I could. I have free will." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's true." And to your point, Jay, I said, it would be maybe not of any great consequence now, but your entire life is going to be nothing more than a compounded series of decisions. And I would submit to you that would not be a good one. And he stopped and thought about it. And it was in that moment that just so happened. I mean, I'm so glad to hear you bring that up because that's what I thought whenever he was sitting there ranting and raving. I'm the old fart. I'm 50 years old. I remember when I was doing his job and probably wasn't thinking about all the consequences of my actions back then. But it's really what life boils down to. And I think you're right. We do try to overcomplicate things. But when you realize the agency that we have over our lives and the agency that is greatest is just become a better decision maker, it's really quite liberating, to be honest.
Jason, one of the best lessons I'd ever learned was that it's okay to pause before you take action. So you want to hit send on an email, you want to send a text right back to somebody. Somebody says something to you that you want to remark against. Do nothing.
Perfect.
Instead of taking action, do nothing.
Yep.
Like there is no law that says that you need to respond in any certain period of time. So the biggest, I run a business and it's hard. In the promotional marketing space, sometimes blue isn't blue, And what I mean by that is very simple. Like the color blue that you might print, it doesn't come out the way that your client likes it to be. And they might call you and say, this is the wrong blue. Well, it's probably the right blue, but I don't have to have that conversation before I get all the information to support whatever I'm going to say next. And, maybe they're right, or maybe they're wrong, and maybe they feel this way. And so it is okay to pause before action. And the concept of pausing before action, I can't tell you, I just don't do anything now that puts me in a negative situation because I don't want to deal with the chaos that negative situations bring. And that chaos can be an argument, a one-on-one. It could be something more expansive. I just don't want to deal with any negativity. And so I try to pattern my life to not be reactionary. And that means that I end up taking a lot of breaks before I communicate back with people if I'm agitated. In fact, I tell my clients jokingly, I'll say, if you send me an email, chances are I've read it immediately. One of 3 things is going to happen. I'm going to reply right away. I'm not going to reply right away. I said, but be sure that the other thing is I'm thinking.
Hmm.
So just know, like, I'm thinking. I read my emails, texts, unless my phone's away, which is very rare. Son's graduation, I didn't check my phone 4 hours Sunday. I think I could do that.
Okay. Good for you.
But like, you just don't need to shoot back at somebody. You just don't need to react. Pause. It's a gift.
Well, you're very wise. One of my virtual mentors is.
I'm very old. Not why. I'm very old. Not
Hey,
wise.
dude. Hey, brother. I'm with you, man. At 50, I realize there's just certain things that you have to be on this earth a certain amount of time to really just try to figure out. There's no book. It's just living through it. I'm with you. And, so Viktor Frankl, who's one of my virtual mentors, exactly the way he said it was between action and reaction is space. And managing that
Yes.
space between the action and the reaction, that's what makes you really successful. It's exactly what you described. And another thing Frankl said was every time you go to make, now this is obviously this is the more consequential decisions, but he said every time you go to make that choice, to make that decision, think as though you're making it again for the second time. In other words, make the first time you do it kind of like what you would do if you were given a do-over, so that you'll think it through a little better. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. And finally, to just put a bow on what you just said, because I do think it's so profound, and it's something that I have done a miserable job executing on in my life.
Interesting.
I'm always quick. I'm quick to send that text back. I've been quick to send the email back, but I try. It's one of those things I really work at.
Still? Still?
What's that? Not so much. Not now. But
Okay.
it was a problem I had to overcome, man. It was a
Okay.
problem I had to overcome. But because I had that visceral reaction, it was hard for me to control. But then
Yeah.
another thing that started in undergrad was one of my professors, Dr. Tim Clipson. He said, always remember, you can never uncommunicate anything.
Totally.
And how true that is. You can be forgiven. You can move on and still be friends. Your wife will still stay married to you, still love you. Your children will still whatever, but you can't uncommunicate it. And here and putting all those things together, I think have taught me some of the most valuable lessons. And also, you know what, Jay? I've realized that sometimes people you realize they don't need my reaction. They don't need my opinion on a certain matter. They don't. I can just let the thing just die.
Yeah, and look, it's ego.
Yeah.
What you're talking about
100%.
right now is ego. So the big piece for me, and this is really, again, this continues to kind of harp through my recovery is ego suppression, or, supplanting my ego, thinking I'm right, knowing I'm right, having to be right. And the way it was always said to me was, would you rather be happy or right? And, I'd rather be happy. And the way for me being happy is to allow other people to be right, or not having to claim the stage when I am right, and allowing being right to be enough. So, that space also creates change. How many times, Jason, have you given space between something that you thought, investigation and or patience, taking the time to view it from the other person's perspective, right? I know how I feel. I feel it in the moment, right? How I feel it in the moment is probably painful. Okay, let me think about how they feel for a second. Let me take their perspective. And, when I'm talking to somebody who's a potential new client, I try to share with them, like, we've got a deep level of accountability as a firm, because I don't know, you hear the golden rule, treat people how you want to be treated. I'm a business owner 8 hours of the day. I'm a consumer 8 hours of the day. I sleep 8 hours of the day. So I'm a consumer as much as I'm an owner of a business. I try to treat people in business like I'd want to be treated by the clients, but I'm a client. How many people am I a customer of? Just treat me like And then I turn around and treat my clients like that. So it's not, if I'm asking my partners, vendors, suppliers, if I'm asking them to treat me a certain way, I at least owe it to my clients to treat them a certain way. And that means having the ability to see my performance through their eyes, my company's performance through their eyes, which often isn't perfect. No, always isn't perfect. So we're pretty good. So yeah, it's ego. I am going to make mistakes. We are going to screw up. Tell me about how we recovered from when that happened. Then we can have a conversation. So yeah, it's a big lesson to learn. And it's an important one. It's why my last 5 years, we've grown year over year, every year. And, it took me a long time to get to this spot, but we're here. So I don't plan on acquiescing it now.
Well, I want to do something that I've never done before. You're gonna be a guinea pig because I just happen to have it right here in front of me. Kind of your CV, if you will, kind of the stops you've made on the way to Inked and building Inked to where it is now. So that's your current business. But here's what I want to do with this, Jay. And I think because this conversation has been so fun because, man, I love kind of digging out the wisdom, the nuggets, and I think you've got a lot of them. I think you've got great perspective. Absolutely, man. And so what I want to do is kind of go through the trajectory of your career, and I want you to, I don't want to put too many things here to think about, but I want you to give me, like, if nothing else, just one lesson learned from the job and maybe one of your biggest failures. I don't care about going through, all the way up to, when you were at Exelon and, the
Yeah, I got
biggest thing you did, the biggest win, the thing that you took with you to the next level that to this day, you're like, you look back and go, I'm going to capitalize on that by not doing it again or whatever. And the
Sure.
reason why I'm doing this, because folks, because we do have a lot of young entrepreneurs. And I was just talking to a young professional that I just recently hired that she said, I listen to your podcast and I love some of the advice you give. So we have some young professionals that I want them to know is that wherever you are, if you're in this first job, the middle job, or maybe you're like Jay and I, you're kind of where you're probably going to be heading into your 70s and 80s or whatever, doesn't matter. There's something to be learned. There's something to be capitalized on. You're making those decisions that compounded over time will lead to wherever you're going to end up. So
All right.
with that
This is gonna
long
be fun.
setup,
This is going to
So,
be fun. I'm interested
all right.
in this.
all right, cool, man. So let's start out with sports
Didn't know,
radio.
didn't know it was coming.
Yeah, that's what makes it fun. So I feel like I can play this along with you, brother. All right, sports radio 610 WIP, go.
I mean, it gave me a voice. I was broadcasting in the place where I grew up. Everybody I went to high school with, everybody I knew, everybody my parents knew, my family knew, with deep tradition, heard my name on the #1 station, and it just gave me it gave me my first ever voice in a big way.
Terrific. Exelon Invitational, hosted by Jim Furyk.
I cold called Jim Furyk's agent to pitch him on the concept of the business. My wife sat in the car. She was my girlfriend at the time. We weren't married. On the way to visit our parents in Cape Cod, she sat in the car for 2.5 hours while I pitched them. It taught me that nothing was impossible and that you don't get anything if you don't ask. I had nothing. And I went in and I pitched this mega company, ISI, at the time, on Jim Furyk putting his name on an event that didn't exist. And I had no money to support it. And it was only a dream, and got them to say yes. So
That's awesome. So I want to piggyback on that a little bit. The story I gave you earlier of the company I was looking at buying that the guy looked for opportunity, same situation, man. I always tell people, if you're somebody that wants to go buy a small business that's not for sale, pick
Yeah.
up the phone, call the owner and say, will you sell me your company?
knock on the
It's-
door.
Yeah. But people think there's some rule or something you can't do. No, what are you going to do? You really think you're going to piss somebody off by saying, hey, you have something that's so valuable, I want it? I mean, just go, if nothing else, go pay somebody a compliment. So I think that's incredible advice, dude. All right, so the next one, this ought to be a pretty big one. Marquee jet. That's a big one, dude.
That was, for me, that was scale. We went from zero to almost $1 billion in 4.5 years. And it's where I learned that big business existed and creativity I learned work ethic and hustle. We used to have a state, Kenny Dichter, my now partner, my always partner, was always said, like in the summer, win the summer, like we don't rest in the summer, our competition does. We would always work harder in the summer to set up the year. So I learned the value of hard work and scale, and that you could just grow and that you didn't need permission to. You could just go out there and sell.
I love it. I love that. You don't need permission to. You can just go freaking sell. Awesome. One key.
Yeah. So probably my biggest disappointment, I listened to other people too much. I went to UNLV, which is kind of an idiot school, and didn't trust myself. Brought in a operator from Cornell. I went to Cornell. I thought he was smarter than me. Another guy was my CFO. I thought he was smarter than me. I didn't listen to my instincts and my own gut and trust myself. And those people aren't in my life anymore. And no one, very few people are after you don't have success. So listen to yourself. You're the one whose life is on the line. That's the lesson I've taken from that experience, and it served me well.
I gotta think that was probably pretty tough for you too, because you and I seem to be linked up in this way. We want to manage our ego to such a degree that at least it sounds like in this case, and I'm just gonna speak for myself, man. It's something I've struggled with. I've tried to always suppress my gut and accentuate what's happening in my head. And a lot of times my head will say, ignore your gut because that person is smarter than you. Listen to what they say. And dude, it's a tough freaking balance but until I realized, we've got more neuroreceptors in our stomach than we do our head. So that listen to your gut kind of pays off.
Yeah. I mean, again, I look back and think it felt more like I was playing business versus doing business.
Yeah.
And, not intentionally, believe me, like it pains me to this moment, but that's the lesson I learned, is that when you're the lead entrepreneur, when it's your name on the line, you make the call. And by the way, I made the calls. I made all those calls. They were all my calls. They weren't all my calls. And they were calls I signed off on and shouldn't have. And
Got it.
that's the learning from that piece, is you're in charge, follow your thoughts. Doesn't mean don't hire smart people. Doesn't mean don't listen to smart people. But, I knew and I know, and I didn't follow that. And, what are you going to do? Those are learnings.
It's kind of like that movie. Is it Margin Call with Jeremy Irons? And he's sitting in this meeting. It's a a fictitious account of 2007, 2008, the subprime fallout. And he says, do you know why I'm here in this chair and why I make the big bucks? Because it sure ain't brains that got me here. It's because I have to decide what I think is going to happen before it happens. And essentially he was saying just that. It's like, it's not about being the smartest egghead in the room. It's about being able to make the decision, take accountability for it. And so I get it, man. Great advice.
Jason, I hired people who were smarter than me, but it wasn't their life on the line. It was mine.
100%. All right. How about Wentworth Hills Golf Club?
I mean, that was a gap job where I got my handicap down to about a 5.
Attaboy.
I'm going to tell you what I learned. I hired a pro by the name of Steve Landy. I had these incredible marketing concepts and ideas, and he followed every single one. He was an old-time pro. And I said, Steve, you've been in this business a long time. I said, everything I shoot at you, you say yes. How come you say yes to everything? He said, Jay, he goes, I've never seen somebody come into this business with the energy that you've come into it. And he said, I've never seen someone with more ideas, and I've never seen someone who's willing to take action against them like you. He said, the least I can do is try it. because what do we have to lose? And it taught me that you should hire people who are willing to follow through on your vision as an entrepreneur and not people who are wanting to fight you as an entrepreneur. And coming off the experience I just had, Wentworth was short. There were some partner issues at the top. I was on the wrong side of it, not a big deal. But like, I'll give you an example. I was the owner operator for general manager, for managing director, whatever the title, for 6 months. I worked bag drop every Friday and Saturday. The pro said to me, Jay, why did you work the bag drop every Friday and Saturday? Aside from me telling you that it was where my roots were, so I loved it. It was when we were the busiest. You know who else was there? Like my customers.
There you go.
Hello.
Yeah,
Well,
sure.
why did I work the bag drop? Because I wanted them to, it was a distressed asset I was revitalizing, and I wanted them to see the guy who was in charge is right here. You have an issue with pace of play? I'm right here. You have an issue with course conditions? I'm right here. So he loved and respected me for it. I loved and respected him for it. He taught me a valuable lesson. Love the man to this day. Was one of the greatest people I ever worked with. Short stint, but very valuable in my time.
Fantastic. Wimco.
Yeah, what an interesting spot. Built a business on St. Bart's. Wimco, I was a little bit of a mercenary there. I was the entrepreneur in residence to a owner who didn't have the skills to help him navigate a situation that the financial crisis caused. And, kind of what I learned there was I did business on a French province, which I had never done before. But the owner there was different than me, and I learned that there was more than one way to get things done. He and I worked well in tandem, and he taught me that he was the master of never make a decision until you absolutely are forced to. And I always thought that was so dumb. That decision has saved me in my current business. That thinking, I don't do it all the time, but that thinking has caused me a very, very, good amount of pain now. He had an agreement to sell me that business. We had a handshake agreement. He backed out on that handshake agreement after a couple years, which is why I ended up leaving the business. Him and I didn't talk for a few years, and then we came together. And he became one of my best clients at Ink Stores over time, and we renewed and became good friends. He actually tragically passed away a few years ago at a very young age, 72. But he was a good man. He was a complex man, but he was a good man, and I loved him. And he taught me a lot.
So that brings us to where you are now. Inked. Talk about it.
I mean, Ink Stores, this is it, right? The biggest thing it's taught me is patience. We started as a branded fitness company. That was a vision of my business partner. We morphed into a retail design shop that didn't scale that fast and was augmented by COVID. And now we are a full service swag company that builds, hosts, manages online stores, and does drop ship and bulk orders, which is sort of our third iteration, but our most successful. And it took us a long time to get here, right? It took us 8 years to find this model. And then after we found it, it took us 5 years to get to this stage that we're at now, which is, kind of heavy growth coming up, not coming up on 8 figures, but, foreseeably, we could be at 8 figures shortly. Patience is a hard thing to learn. And I'm all those experiences that we've talked about have gotten me to this place today. And, I'd say patience is the biggest thing I've learned with Inked, right? Is how to zoom out. We're not doing the revenue that I want to do today. Okay, how'd we do over the last few days? How'd we do over the week? How'd we do over the month? I don't think you can let it drag over a month. I think you've got to be more vigilant in this business because it's pretty transactional, or can be. But patience, how to zoom out, trust yourself, trust your decisions, trust the people you're around every day that you hired. But ultimately it comes back to that other lesson I learned, which is like, I'm the one who's accountable. So the buck stops here. And, I love this business. I love the promotional marketing business. I love the clients I have. I feel deeply towards them. Ones who support me, especially during this, this time where I'm getting emails every other day about companies raising their prices to me on tariffs. I'm communicating to my clients, they pay less, not more. Think about that. My vendors, my partners are communicating to me, telling me they're charging me more. I am in turn communicating to my clients that if they continue working with me the way they've been working with me in the same velocity, they're going to pay less. So that's how I do business. That's my business philosophy, right? I want my clients to feel appreciated, respected, and loved. I hate transactional business. I do it. I don't love it. I don't like it. I've got long-term clients, and that's how I feel about business. You've taken me through a lot of years and a lot of lessons. I hope that was a fun experiment because I enjoyed it.
Dude, that was fantastic. And there's one question I got to leave that with, because you were being self-effacing and a little humble. You do have a lot of wisdom. You just don't make those stops and do those things without pulling some wisdom from it, man. So, but now that you're able to look back over that amazing trajectory, how do you define success at this point in your life? And I say that at this point because, listener, here's what I mean by that to my audience. This is a guy who has made a lot of money, been in some, flown private jets, hung out with professional golfers, done all the things, worked to the bone, but now at the time when it really matters and kind of having a more objective look, I would think, at what real success is. What does it look like, Jay? How do you define success at this point?
Oh, you just try not to be corny when you say things like this. You try not to be, like cliche filled so my left-hand person, or right-hand person, whatever you want to call them, has been with me 10 years. Next level person's been with me 7. We're not a huge company, so those are significant lengths of time. I'd like them to have, I want them to feel appreciated, have a little more comfort. So, that's important to me. And then, I've got 3 kids, and I'm not in a position where I'm not going to show them the best version of me. And the best version of me is being present for them, being present for my business and employees, being calm in the face of adversity. Adversity can happen in many different ways. This weekend's a perfect example. We were at my son's graduation. We're staying with at an Airbnb on a farm where we usually stay. The family has 2 beagles. My daughters opened the door. The beagles ran out. They sprinted faster than I've ever seen 2 beagles sprint. We were faced with potentially losing these 2 people's dogs. And, the first thing that comes to my mind is I want to, get mad because the beagles got out. But instead, we went and, along with the owner, found them. And that was an hour of angst. But, in my head, I'm constantly saying, like, don't make this worse. Everyone feels bad. You don't need to reinforce how bad they feel. Like, take your feelings and throw them out and be strong. Be someone who's there for the people who are hurting, right? My daughter's hurt because they potentially could have lost these people's dogs. Sounds crazy, sounds silly, but these 2 kids were torn up. My wife was torn up, right? We're dog lovers, beagle lovers. So instead of being a jerk, I was being supportive, and I was being helpful, and I was being, I'm on a Kubota tractor running through the wood, so like, it sounds like a silly example, but that's a real life thing that happened that could have derailed an otherwise momentous weekend, but instead became a footnote to be something humorous that we can look back on. Believe me, I could have turned that into not being humorous and to being, oh, dad was a jerk. And I'm really proud when I look back on moments like that where I can say that that's true. So yeah, that's a real life example of something that happened.
I think that's terrific, man. It goes back to, again, it's being the person you want to be. It's focusing on an identity that you can be proud of. And, we try to make it all about dollars and cents and how many, how many yachts can you ski behind Gigi, Gordon Gekko? But no, it's really just those things like that. It's being a person that reacts the way you want to in front of your kids. I deal, my daughters are grown now. My first one's about to get married. We're planning her wedding right now. So there's plenty of moments for me to be like, oh gosh, are you kidding me? But man, it's the same deal, dude. I'm just sitting there going, I'm more focused on her remembering her dad's reactions and behavior during this
Yes.
time, right? Because that's what
You
she's going
get
to
to
think
be,
about.
you get to be as angry as you want in your head,
Exactly,
That-
man.
but you can't show it on your face and it can't come out of your mouth.
That's
That's
right.
the rule.
That's right, brother. Well, Jay, man, I tell you what, again, it took a couple of reschedules. Thank you for being so understanding with my crazy schedule. And this was a great conversation, brother. How can people find you, keep up with you? And also, like I said before we even started recording, if there's anything that we missed that you want to convey to this audience, brother, the microphone is yours.
Yeah, all good. I appreciate that. I'm easy to find. I made a point this year that I was going to post on LinkedIn every day. I write every post. It's not AI generated, maybe AI assisted, but not generated. And they all deal with things I'm going through in my life, and they're authentic and real, as I would hope that you've found me. And I'm easy to find there on in LinkedIn and Jay at inked INKDSTORES.com, inkstores.com, jay@inkstores.com. And yeah, happy to chat anytime about swag, merch, recovery, life, entrepreneurship, and Beagles. Happy to talk Beagles. Always happy to talk Beagles.
Beagles that don't run away. How about that? Beagles
All Beagles run away, Jason. All Beagles run away.
Well, listen. All right. So you said something in this conversation about how you focus, how you look at business as not being transactional. I'm the same way. I look at this podcast that same way. I don't look at it as, oh, okay, got a cool guest on. There's Jay. He's out. Dude, I want you back here. I would now that we know you, now that I know you, I like to, and this has happened on this podcast. It's been the greatest benefit of me having this podcast, Jay, is that I've made more friends all over the country that come back on the show. And now you're just going to, now you can be Jay, and people know you. And we talk about some of these, whatever you've written an article on. If there's something you really want to get off your chest, shoot me an email, say, hey, Jason, I think this will make an episode. Let's riff on this. Dude, the mic is yours. I would love that. If you're willing, this audience, this platform, it's yours, my brother, anytime.
I love it. I appreciate it. When's the wedding?
Oh, man, probably about a year from now. We're going tonight to have dinner and show her the actual space where it's probably going to be, because she's moving from Atlanta to Dallas. I've been helping her over in Dallas look at houses the last couple of days. And so it's probably going to be, I think, like middle of May, most likely, of next year. So I've got a little while.
All right, good. Love it.
And
we'll talk before that.
Oh, for sure. Now, do you have girls?
Girl, boy, girl.
Girl, boy, girl. So get ready, brother. Hey, so you haven't had to pay for a wedding yet?
I have not had to pay for a wedding yet.
Okay, so one of our episodes will be maybe just a therapist session of you coaching me through it, brother. Wow. Just all I can say is, wow.
Yeah.
It's insane. But
yeah, that's right. Look, my wedding story and my wedding planning story is as follows. My wife said she wanted me involved in planning our wedding. I said, Amy, I said, I'd love to be involved. I said, for the menu to start, I'd love chicken wings. She said, never mind. Perfect,
Well
Amy.
done, sir. Well done, sir.
Mhm.
Oh, man. Well, Jay Sapovits, this has been so awesome, brother. Thanks for being on the Jason Wright Show.
Jason, thank you.
All right, Brett. Well, that does it for this episode of the Jason Wright Show. Thank you so much for listening. This has been a Texas Titan Media production. Fourth Wall did the music. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Please consider going out to jasonwrightnow.com and signing up for the Vitruvian letter. Also, please go out to iTunes. It takes like 30 seconds to just leave us a 5-star rating. It does wonders for the podcast. I would be so grateful. And with that, until we meet again, go crush it and endeavor to improve always in all ways. I'm out.